Hey, welcome! Today we're going to dive deep into the world of logic to challenge an idea so fundamental it's been a cornerstone for over 100 years. We're talking about a full-on revolution in how we think about what a sentence even means. So yeah, let's get right into it. So let me ask you something. Take two completely separate, totally true statements. First one, the Earth revolves around the sun. Got it? Second one, let's just say for the sake of argument, today's date is September 18th, 2025. Now, are those two sentences the same? I mean, your gut reaction is probably no way, of course not. They talk about completely different things, right? But for over a century, classical logic had a surprisingly different answer. And that surprising answer? Well, that brings us right to our first topic, what I'm calling logic's big assumption. Let's take a look at the traditional view that saw those two sentences as being, believe it or not, almost identical. Okay, so here's the core concept. For a classical logician, the only thing that really mattered about a sentence was its truth value. That is it true or is it false? That's it. So if both of our sentences happen to be true, then from a purely logical standpoint, they were treated as equivalent. The actual content, the meaning, that was kind of secondary. This is where our story gets really, really interesting. A whole new way of thinking popped up, one that wanted to look a lot deeper, to go way beyond just a simple true or false label. Now, this idea we've been talking about, it actually has a name, Frege's principle, named after the brilliant logician Gottlieb Frege. He basically proposed that sentences are just fancy, complex names for one of two things, the abstract concept of true or the abstract concept of false. It's a really powerful and simple idea for sure, but as we're about to see, it definitely has its limits. All right, this slide really lays out this central battleground here. You can think of it like this. Fregean logic is kind of like a vending machine. You put in a sentence, and you only get one of two things back, a true coin or a false coin. But non-Fregean logic, that's more like a bank teller. It doesn't just care if your check is valid, it cares about the specific account it refers to. This approach focuses on something called semantic reference, what a sentence is actually about. Each true sentence points to its own unique semantic correlate, its own specific place in the universe of ideas. So the big takeaway here is that this non-Fregean approach totally changes the game. First off, it just throws Frege's principle right out the window. Second, it brings in this new idea of semantic correlates. And third, it adds a brand new logical tool, a special connective for non-Fregean equivalence that lets us ask, hey, do these two sentences actually mean the same thing? Not just, are they both true? I know, this might all sound a little abstract. So let's bring it down to earth and look at how it all builds into a real practical application. We're going to explore a powerful logical system built on these exact principles. So meet SCIQ. It's a non-Fregean logic, and it's specifically designed to interpret and reason about some seriously complex and abstract mathematical series. This is where the rubber really meets the road. Now, the full name is a bit of a mouthful. Non-Fregean Propositional Logic with Propositional Quantifiers. You don't need to memorize that, I promise. Just know that this formal name tells us it's a super robust system, built to handle exactly the kind of nuanced reasoning we've been talking about. So what does it work on? Well, SCIQ is used to dig into the foundations of abstract algebra, concepts like groups, rings, and fields. These are the fundamental building blocks that mathematicians use to describe symmetry and structure. And SCIQ gives us a powerful new lens to understand them. But with great power comes, some very strange and fascinating properties. This new tool isn't just powerful, it's also profoundly complex in ways that really challenge our expectations. And this is where things get a little weird. By adding this whole new layer of meaning, SCIQ ends up behaving in some really counterintuitive ways. It kind of breaks some of the rules we might expect a well-behaved logic to follow. Okay, for instance, SCIQ is what's called undecidable, and that in the world of logic is a huge deal. It basically means you can't build a perfect computer program that's guaranteed to tell you if any given statement in the system is true or false. Some questions are just fundamentally unanswerable. It also lacks something called the finite model property, which is a fancy way of saying that to prove certain ideas true, you have to think about them in an infinite space. You can't just check a limited number of cases. And yet, even with all these strange properties, it can still be translated back into classical logic, which creates this fascinating bridge between this weird new world and the one we thought we knew. So, after all this theory, what's the big takeaway here? Why should we even care about challenging a century-old principle of logic? It really all boils down to this. By moving beyond a simple true or false worldview, non-Fregean logic gives us a much richer, way more expressive language. It lets us build tools like SCIQ that can formally reason about meaning and reference, not just validity. It makes logic a more powerful instrument for exploring the most abstract corners of science and mathematics. And that kind of brings us to our final thought. The story of non-Fregean logic is this perfect example of how progress sometimes means you have to question the things you just take for granted. So it leaves us with this awesome question. If a concept as fundamental as the meaning of truth in logic can be redefined, what other bedrock ideas in science, math, or even our own thinking are just waiting for a new perspective? Thanks for joining this explainer.